Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the sound of a turntable spinning in the corner of the room as the needle finds the vinyl and explodes from the speakers with a rhythm no one had ever heard before. The 1950s weren't just a decade. They were the beginning of a new way of life. Young people were starting to claim their own voice, while parents eyed this so-called rock and roll with suspicion, a sound that shook radios, jukeboxes, and even hearts. It was a time when every detail, from the clothes to the way people danced, seemed to announce that the world would never be the same. More than recalling dates or names, revisiting that era is like returning to a sunlit backyard where life seemed simple and full of discoveries. It's diving into the feeling of freedom that buoyed a generation that wanted to dance, laugh and defy the rules, and it's in this atmosphere, amid frothy milkshakes, newly arrived TV sets, and the rebellious beat of rock that we'll walk behind the scenes of 1950s American youth. Rock is born, and parents freak out. Radio was the great companion of American families in the 1950s, but it was also where a revolution was born, one that left plenty of people with their hair standing on end. When Elvis Presley started swiveling his hips and unleashing that booming voice, teenagers leapt from their chairs to dance while parents wrinkled their noses, convinced it was the beginning of moral decay. Alongside him, names like Chuck Berry and Little Richard made the speakers rattle with electric guitars and beats that seemed impossible to ignore. For the youth, it was as if someone had lit a spark. Music was no longer just something to sit and listen to in the living room. It was something to feel in your body, to move your feet, clap your hands, defy authority. Rock didn't ask permission. It walked right through the front door and turned everyday life upside down. Those songs spoke of freedom, rebellion, and fun, exactly what young people wanted in a country that, until then, had seemed governed by rigid, predictable rules. The result was a mix of shock and euphoria. While worried mothers tried to hide the records and preachers railed against the devil's music, teenagers gathered in dance halls, school gyms, and parking lots to try out this new way of being young. The wave was impossible to contain. Rock not only soundtracked the parties, but also forged a shared sense of identity. Modern teen culture was being born with a rhythm, a voice, and an attitude all its own. School, milkshakes, and drive-ins. In the 1950s, school life went far beyond the classroom. Once lessons were done, the true spectacle of youth began. Diners with jukeboxes were essential hangouts. Vibrant music, milkshakes, shared among friends, and conversations that seemed never-ending. There, every song choice was almost a declaration of identity, and nothing symbolized freedom more than the drive-in. Pulling in the car, watching a movie under the stars, and taking a chance on a first date created a one-of-a-kind mood. Amid popcorn, nerves, and shy glances, stories were born that would live forever in a generation's memory. These spaces, simple at first glance, were laboratories of social life. At school, you learned algebra. In diners and at drive-ins, you learned how to be young, with all the discoveries, rituals, and little dramas that shaped that unforgettable era. Fashion and youth identity. If there was a perfect stage for 1950s youth to show who they were, that stage was clothing. Full skirts, often worn with voluminous petticoats, twirled across dance floors, as if they were extensions of the music itself. Letterman jackets, varsity coats bearing school initials, turned hallways into improvised runways of teenage pride. And of course there was pomade, the secret to setting immaculate hairstyles that seemed to defy both wind and time. Fashion, more than aesthetics, functioned as a genuine badge of identity. The greasers, with leather jackets and polished boots, carried an aura of rebellion that set them apart at once. The preppies, with tidy sweaters and pleated skirts, represented the more well-behaved traditional side. It was as if each group wore not just clothes, but a silent manifesto about which path they would choose amid the era's cultural transformations. These choices weren't mere vanity. They defined friendships, hangouts, and even rivalries. The right jacket or the ideal hairstyle could open social doors or close them just as quickly. In the end, dressing in the 1950s wasn't just a matter of style. It was a way of declaring to the world how each young person wanted to be seen, recognized, and remembered. Technology that changed lives. Few decades transformed domestic life as much as the 1950s. The arrival of television in living rooms brought a novelty that quickly became indispensable. Before, families gathered around the radio to hear news or soap operas. Now the experience was visual, colorful in black and white, with idols appearing at the center of the room. Variety shows, musical performances, and even commercials changed the way people dreamed, consumed, and had fun. At the same time, record players and portable radios began to give young people autonomy. No longer did they have to depend on the main room or their parents' choices. A turntable in the bedroom or a pocket radio was enough to carry the soundtrack of one's own life. Those little magic boxes allowed each teenager to own their moments, choosing when and where to hear the voices of Elvis, Chuck Berry, or whatever favorite group was in the spotlight. These innovations not only altered habits, but also created new ways of being together. While television brought families closer on nights of shared programming, the portable radio loosened that centrality a bit, giving young people a space for intimacy and independence. Technology, simple by today's standards, opened the door to a new sense of control over everyday life and, for many, offered a first taste of what it meant to live in a constantly changing world. Play and community in the suburbs. Childhood in the 1950s had its own rhythm, defined by freedom and imagination. The quiet streets of the suburbs were the main stage, where bicycles became fast horses and baseballs crossed backyards without asking for permission. There was no need for packed schedules or glowing screens. All it took was gathering the neighborhood kids and inventing a new game to make the afternoon unforgettable. Boy Scouts clubs also played an important role, teaching discipline and teamwork, but in a way that still allowed space for fun-filled adventures. Among camping trips, bonfires, and songs, many young people discovered values that extended beyond the uniform and would stay with them throughout their adult lives. This sense of community also extended to families. Street parties, weekend barbecues, and spontaneous backyard gatherings created strong bonds among neighbors. The feeling was that everyone took care of everyone, and any celebration was reason enough to share homemade desserts and stories outdoors. In this environment of closeness, every game, every sunny afternoon, and every gathering reinforced the idea that growing up was a collective experience marked by unity and the simplicity of everyday life. Classic foods and pop culture in the family. The 1950s were also marked by flavor. Neon-lit diners served juicy hamburgers, crispy fries, and milkshakes that seemed to sum up the very essence of youthful joy. In soda fountains, Formica counters and swivel stools provided the perfect setting for quick meetings, laughter, and long conversations set to a soundtrack that never stopped playing. At home, Grandma's recipes still ruled. Apple pies, homemade cakes, and traditional dishes brought generations together around the table. It was a curious balance. On one side, the practical modern food from diners. On the other, the warmth of family meals, filled with fond memories and smells that stayed etched in the mind. And when dinner was over, another collective ritual began, gathering in front of the television. Variety shows, series, and musical performances captivated audiences, creating moments of togetherness where parents and children laughed, sang, or got emotional together. Many songs that echoed on the radio gained even more strength when they appeared on the screen, reinforcing the sense that pop culture had finally entered the hearts of families. It was in this blend of flavors and sounds that the decade found its most vivid portrait, simple, warm, and unforgettable. Revisiting the 1950s is like flipping through an album full of vivid memories, where each page brings a mix of youth, rebellion, family, and discoveries that changed the way people lived. It was in this setting that rock found its voice. Fashion became a banner, television entered homes, and the suburbs turned into stages for community and friendship. More than a decade, it was the birth of a lifestyle that still evokes nostalgia and fascination today. And you, What memories from that time or stories passed down by your family are etched in your mind? Share in the comments because every memory helps keep this part of our cultural history alive. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to follow more content full of nostalgia and curiosities. These memories are a treasure, and it's together that we can keep them alive. See you soon.